guys, how are we? Hope you're well. Consakijo here. Inspire YG is the page on Facebook and on Instagram as well. How have you been? I've been everywhere. For lack of a better word, it's just been crazy 2 weeks. I've been in isolation. Became a close contact of a positive COVID case. So I just had to isolate as well. So that's what I've been doing for the past couple of days. So not fun at all. So hope you guys been well. For the ones popping in here for the first time, thank you for popping in. Nice to meet you. Even though it's weird because we're not meeting, but yeah, nice to interact. But also thank you for the ones who always pop in and say hi, like the page, link up. Appreciate it. This page, I created it around 3 years ago, and my mission with Inspire YG, so YG is young generation, and my hope was to actually share my personal journey as an international student. I migrated to Sydney, Australia from Kenya, East Africa. So, and what I do with this page is I share my personal journey as an international student. I also share a little bit about, I believe that I know something. I'm not a walking vacuum. And first and foremost, I'm an expert of my own life. So definitely not to say that I'm an expert of everything in life, but one thing I'm very sure of is I'm an expert of my own life, and I own up to my life experiences, the good and the not so good, right? So, well, I have a background in the business world. I've done a bit of business administration, but I also got background in social work, and my minors were in psychology and sociology. So I have a passion for mental health, and the reason why I give that background is because today I thought there's something that I've been seeing in the past couple of weeks, and I obviously being Kenyan, I follow Kenyan news as well. And as much as I follow Australian news, I like to know what's happening back there, because that's where all my loved ones, most of my loved ones are anyway, but that's the country I was born and bred. But I've been seeing a couple of concerns with a lot of people, mainly parents, but also this issue I saw has been brought up by a couple of media personalities. For example, I think a couple of maybe weeks ago, I saw Karen Mutoko talked about this, but I've also seen a couple of social media influencers talking about it on their pages, on their platform. So it's about the ongoing situation with the schools and the children and COVID and all that kind of mess, in terms of schools having to do what they can to actually help the kids catch up with their learning. But what I've been seeing being left out, the conversation that I'm seeing being left out of this is a conversation around mental health of children around this period of the pandemic. Now, I just started thinking, as I was just seeing this information and people talking about it and people saying, no, there's something wrong about it. It's almost like people are identifying, both parents and the society, not just in Kenya, but also like around the world. People are identifying something is amiss somewhere, with children having to work extra long hours so that they can catch up with their learning. But it's almost like the conversation around mental health and how there could be a long-term effect on this whole hustle of kids trying to catch up on what they missed out on, the long-term effect of that. Because I just have a feeling, I've always known, was way before I even did my mental health unit at uni. I always knew that especially in our African society, it's almost like there's still that thought or that idea that mental health is a taboo. and people don't openly. It's not. I mean, now at least young people and the millennials and the generation coming up, they're talking about it openly. But I think our forefathers did not talk about mental health. It wasn't almost like a thing. It's like, you're going through a hard time. Okay, suck it up. Let's go to the next. But I just have a feeling that it's almost like a ticking time bomb to ignore the mental health of children during this period, because sometimes I feel like we underestimate what children know and what children actually understand, yet in different aspects, or in different just different concepts. Like, it doesn't matter, in different spaces. People just assume that kids are just kids. They don't just get things the way adults get things. They might perceive things, obviously, from their lens as kids, but I do feel they know more than we give credit for, or more than we give them credit. So now I just went up on Google Scholar, because not everything on Google. I mean, if you've been to uni, at least in Australia, you're not finding any information to use for your essay on Google. Okay, it's not gonna work. Wikipedia, but Google Scholar, it does have peer-reviewed journals, which obviously are more credible, right? So there was an article I saw there, and I think it was a report done by a John. I don't know whether he was a mental health expert. I don't remember, but it was in the UK. And I found exactly what I've been thinking of. I actually found someone had done a research on it at the beginning of the pandemic. This is, I think, last year, towards the end of last year. And it was saying the COVID-19 pandemic is likely to sort of make it worse, exacerbate existing mental health problem among children. And they were talking about isolation, obviously problems stemming from isolation and kids not being able to spend time with their friends and their peers. And the warning came after a research found that 1 in 6 young people now have a probable mental illness. And I mean, when you look at mental illness, it's a very broad general word for a lot of illnesses, right? So you're talking about anxiety, probable that could lead up to depression, and things like that. So I mean, so there was a survey done, and on that survey they were talking about the potential impact on children's mental health was highlighted as one of the biggest dangers of lockdown early in the pandemic. In a report published, it actually just brought up those fears and talked about how legit it actually is. And another thing that I saw that I thought was interesting is they did a survey and they asked parents what were their concerns, what they were feeling were their concerns when they observed and looked at their children around the pandemic period. And 49% of those parents said their child not seeing their friends and socializing was the top concern, right? And among those parents, 45% cited worries over their child's mental health. Now, in contrast, just 30% said their child's falling behind in their education was one of their top concerns. So this survey was done in the UK. And the mental health and well-being resources, obviously, they have now started realizing that it's actually something, of importance to actually look at and give more attention now. And one of the things they're saying is that they're creating free spaces, especially online, where they can interact with children and see what's going on with them, sort of catch up with them, and see how they can support the children's mental health and well-being, even though not in a face-to-face kind of setup, but even just, honestly, just using the internet. So, and what they were saying is we simply cannot wait any longer as a society to start putting in place the foundations of a mental health education for our children. And I started thinking, okay, now this study was in the UK. I saw a couple of studies, and some of them were also in Australia. They've done a couple of studies in Melbourne. And why I was interested in Melbourne is because within Australia, Melbourne has been the state that that has been affected by COVID the longest compared to all the other states. And they had 2 lockdowns last year. And they did a survey. I'm going to put a bit of a screenshot right here, a screenshot on the surveys they did last year. One survey was done before the lockdown, and the other one was done before the second lockdown, and the other one was done on the second lockdown. And they were looking at what's happening to children from one lockdown to another. And they were I think some of the variables that they were using is they were looking at anger, they were looking at some kids being clingy, some kids being very emotional than they were before, signs of stress, signs of depression, signs of anxiety, and those levels had shoot up looking at the first time the lockdown hit compared to the second time. And this is now in Melbourne, and obviously it was amazing because we were comparing that with other states like New South Wales, Sydney, where I'm at, and the gap, the difference was just unimaginable. Like, it was just there, it was just evident. And it was the same with the level of, the stress levels of parents in Melbourne and parents in other states that were not, were not affected by COVID for an extensive period of time. So, looking at these countries, and obviously I do not want to underestimate the resources that are in these countries and the capacity in terms of handling COVID. For example, like Australia has been on lockdown since the beginning of COVID, right? They've obviously locked the borders since last year. So you cannot obviously compare Australia with the UK. The UK obviously experienced COVID in a huge, on a bigger magnitude compared to Australia. But also, when I look at Kenya and looking at how I'm not hearing the topic or the concerns or the attention being put on mental health, and looking at how are children coping. And there was this thread that I saw the other day, and I was very heartbroken. This mother was concerned, and she put a post on an influencer on Facebook, and she was raising concerns of how she's feeling that her child is going to be affected. I felt like she could not put a finger on the exact issue, but I felt like she was talking about mental health. She just did not word it like that. But she was talking about how she's feeling that her child might not cope with that level of stress. So the school, I don't remember the exact school it was, I know it was in Nairobi, but she was talking about the child leaving the house at 5 in the morning and then coming back at 8 p.m. Monday to Friday, and then going to school on Sunday in the morning and coming back at 4 p.m. And these kids are having to go through this kind of system until they're able to catch up. And I don't know when that is. I don't know the period between now that they're doing this kind of syllabus to when they're supposed to supposedly catch up with the syllabus the way it was pre-COVID. And I just started thinking, when I looked at the comment section, other parents were bashing her for actually raising this, and they were calling her lazy, and they were telling her that she's enabling laziness that is evident in her child, because her child, if her child cannot be able to wake up on those hours and work those kind of stressful hours, then it's all on her. She should remove her from that school and homeschool. And I felt so sad at how the level of, I don't know whether it's lack of awareness or it's just that people are nonchalant. that you just assume that a child who used to go to school at 8 and leave at 4 is now okay to go to school at 5 and leave at 8 p.m. And you're just looking at this child and saying she should figure it out or he should figure it out and he should be okay. And I mean, if you underestimate the mental health of a child, be ready to die. Just the same way you give your children a balanced diet so that they can have a well, nourished body, you're giving your child the right nutrition so that they can have a healthy physical body, right? If you identify that, why don't you identify that you will need to have systems in place to take care of their mental health? Why don't you think about stress that child is having to come home tired, having to do assignment, having to wake up early, getting less sleep, then on top of that, not being able to see their friends, not being able to play with their friends the way they used to play, not being able to do the things they love to do, to actually rest as a child. And I just wonder, is this going to actually bring us a long-term issue in the future? Are we actually on a ticking time bomb? I just don't know. I don't know. The Ministry of Education in Kenya, I don't know, and I'm just giving Kenya as an example because these are the issues I saw there, but I'm sure other countries are probably having the same issues. But I have a feeling that, there should be someone in the Ministry of Education who actually understands the importance of giving attention to children and actually being able to identify the mental health is more important than children's grades, because you really don't want your child to be in a position where they are 18, 19 and they're having to deal with mental health illnesses. You are not going to be prepared for, you think it's costing you right now to actually put mechanisms in place to actually help your child, cope with the stress of pandemic. It's even more expensive and time consuming and emotionally and psychologically excruciating to deal with your child when they're actually going through mental health issues. If you can actually be able to sit down with your children or just observe them and see whether they're actually stressed, whether they're coping, whether they understand what's happening, whether they have support, please do that. If you have a niece, a nephew, a young brother or sister, please talk to them, please observe them and see if they're okay. I've just been feeling this deep in my spirit and I thought I'm gonna share it. And when I googled it, I didn't even know there are people who had done research on it, but actually there's a lot of research that has been done, especially in countries that jumped on board and and quickly started identifying that there could be some issues here. So what, like I said, I'm obviously not a psychologist, but just based on the the knowledge I have with mental health and my background, I feel like this is an important issue and I feel like it should be given the attention it deserves, because the children are not our future. The children are our present before they are our future. So, all right, I know this was a heavy and long topic, and but I hope it will help someone out there and maybe even just start a conversation and help people just observe and just children. I did not get an A in school, but I've had my fair share of successes in this life. Just because your child is not getting A's in school does not mean they are a failure in life. They are talented and they are gifted in other ways. Support your children's mental health is more important than even those grades you're after. All right, thank you so much, and thank you for popping in, and till the next one. God bless. Bye.